welcome to episode 4 of the Scot-Craft podcast. And we're going to be talking about wee museums tonight, new crafts and camping. But first, and before we welcome our special guest this week, Paul, what have you been making?
What have I been making? Actually, just the other day had somebody bring down a sword that was dug up in a local garden. I couldn't do much with it because it was quite a relic condition, more or less. But I could at least identify it as an 1821 pattern light cavalry sabre, which makes you wonder, how did it get in someone's garden to be dug up in the first place? A wee bit of restoration work, a wee bit of refurbishment work, and I was delighted to take care of a late 14th century medieval sword for a short while as well. So magic stuff, yeah, really special stuff to get a close study at, a close look at.
And there's not many of them around, so where did that come from?
It was, it went through auction, and the fellow that bought it has sent it on to us until he finds a better solution for shipping over to Italy, where he happens to be. So it's come to us in the meantime. But they do sometimes go through auction, these more ancient pieces, quite special.
Yeah, it looked very cool. Maybe the sword in the garden was just like David Morrison next door to me cutting his hedge with a big katana that he had
quite possible.
back in the day. Possible. Cutting his privet hedge with it. Absolutely brilliant.
That's true.
I love it. Right, so Michelle Spink from Adventures in Angus, amongst other things, is coming to join us today. So welcome, Michelle. Tell us, first of all, about your personal life and your craft life as well, because there's a bit of a thin line between the two, right?
Do you know what? I wouldn't say there was much of a line. No, that's true. Yeah, where to start? That's a big question.
It is.
Tell me about your personal life. Yeah, so I guess my professional, I run Angus Outdoor Learning, and I have been running that now for 3 years. That is essentially facilitating outdoor learning to local schools and charities. I basically play outdoors. I get to meander through the wilderness. I get to hang out by the sea and rock pool, and there's so much that I do, and I just get to enjoy the outdoors. And so I guess that does really cross into my personal life, because that's exactly what I would be doing on a given day. So I pinch myself a lot that that's something that I can do as a job, get paid for it. It's wild. But yeah, it's quite exciting. I work with predominantly a local primary school in Arbroath, Lady Lone, the school by the sea, and I've been working there now for 3 years, and I have a lot of connections with like the children, different teaching groups. It's quite an exciting opportunity. But
it's funny because when you go through Facebook, you sit and click and like and all the rest of it. Yours is one of the easiest to like, because you're always doing all this cool stuff with the kids down at the beach.
Know. Do you know, it's a funny thing, because somebody said to me the other day, you're always out adventuring. You're always, you're spending your day adventuring, and then you're off out again, it seems, doing something. And it caught me, because I didn't really regard it honestly as adventuring. It's just a way of life. It's just something that's become normal. And sometimes, I'll be honest, I have to stop and really notice what I'm doing, what it is that I'm actually given the opportunity to do. So I have to do that quite regularly, actually.
But it's that gratitude thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You are grateful for being able to do the things that you want to do. It's a great privilege if you can find something you really enjoy doing. Paul's nodding away, of course, because that's what we do. We're just big kids, really, aren't we? Every day's a craft day. It's absolutely magic. But you strike me as somebody that gives quite a lot back to your community, Angus and Arbroath in particular. So what does Arbroath mean to you?
Well, Arbroath's my home. Arbroath is my home. Like I really feel really connected to Arbroath. Like my whole family is here. I have lived here. I have shared. I went to school here. My school friends were here. I have memories of Arbroath before it even looks the way it does now. Things have changed so much even since I was a teenager, and I it's just very important to me as a person to feel connected to a place. And Arbroath, I do. I know the only downside is you can't go shopping. Like, you can't go to Tesco's or Morrison's and get a quick shop. That's the thing, because you know everyone. I like that feeling that I know people. I feel connected here. And so Arbroath, to me, it means everything. I can't ever imagine me honestly moving away from Arbroath. And there are times where, I'm going to be honest, like, I've spoken to people who've travelled the world, and I used to think it was quite embarrassing that I was born here in Arbroath and I've lived here my whole life and I haven't lived anywhere else. And I was quite embarrassed of that fact, honestly. Just think, God, what kind of lame person never leaves home, do you know what I mean? Stays in the same town her whole life. But actually, after speaking to several of these people, I realised that I had a sense of belonging that they didn't have, that they were looking for. And I remember a chap saying that to me. He was like, I really envy the fact that you've had that stability your whole life. And it really turned things on their head for me, because I thought, he's right. It's about perspective at the end of the day. And it's like, if you can see it in that way, I'm actually really proud, to have held it out as long.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I always used to think that as well, that, in order to be worldly and have a worldview and stuff, that you needed to have travelled and lived lots of different places. But then I always looked at George Mackay Brown, from Orkney, who went off to university, to Newbattle College, and then went back to Orkney and wrote, sort of mind-expanding poetry and short stories and novels, with an incredible sense of place, but with this complete worldview. He wasn't well travelled at all. He came from one place and he went back to it and stayed there. And he's my favourite writer by far. So here's a good Arbroath question for you, Michelle. The all-important: Peppo's or Marco's?
Good question. And I mean, Peppo's, 100% Peppo's all the way, right? This is funny because the old Peppo's, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
is this Doric he's speaking now?
I know.
So for the uninitiated, the two main chip shops.
Because you'll have to translate for me, let alone anyone else right now.
The two main fish and chip shops in Arbroath, down by the harbour, were Peppo's and Marco's. Marco's is still there. Peppo's is reopened as something else. But it was two Italian brothers in Peppo's that were just fantastic. And the way it was always described to me was Peppo's used lard and Marco's used vegetable oil.
There you go.
But Paul, if you've never had a Peppo's fish supper, he used to kind of hard fry it, right? So that it would really, really quickly fry it in lard. That it was dark brown, right? Really deep brown colour and super crispy, but really soft in the inside. It was like magic.
Right,
it's magic.
Okay.
I remember as a teenager, you'd go into Peppo's and you'd ask them for the crispy bits. The wee bits that were left over.
Yeah, I've seen that in Perth as well.
See, the thought of eating that now is that turns my stomach. But we used to just think it was great because it was free, and you were like, get this bag of crispy bits, and you'd walk through the street, eating these crispy bits. But Peppo's just had the character. You walked in there, and you just felt like they were waiting for you. They were just the friendliest, two brothers, and I have a lot of time for that. It's not just about, the food, which was great. It's also that welcome, that feeling of this is a friendly place,
Yeah, for me it was always coming in from the football. Going to the chip
I'm getting the impression this is the Arbroath version of Vulvona and Crolla or Fortnum and Masons.
Very much so.
Got you.
But just classier.
Got you.
Yeah, I always used to go in because I love Arbroath. I mean, I've never lived in Arbroath, but I grew up spending weekends in the caravan in Arbroath because I had aunties on the same street on the Red Lion. So I used to come out of one caravan, toddle down and go and visit Auntie Jean in her caravan. And it was the first time I remember going to the football and Pleasureland and stuff. And that's why I'm a season ticket holder at Gayfield. Because it's nostalgia and it's just a nice wee town. I like wee places. They're easier to get your head round. And coming out of Gayfield and going along the roads, I brought some guys up from Preston and Glasgow and Edinburgh for a match, and we went and stood in the harbour and ate a Peppo's fish supper and went round all the wee pubs at the foot of the Toon and stuff, and it was just magic. They loved it. And then they all went home on the train and they're raving about it, you know. It's a great wee place, Arbroath. Absolutely brilliant.
It is. It is a great wee place. And again, it's like that. I think if you see it like that, then you'll love it, you know. And I think that's it. It's about the harbour's fantastic. I still go to, we still go for a chippy tea. And actually, to be fair, we do go to Marco's now. But we still have a chippy tea down at the harbour. I mean, it's still a really nice experience. It's always busy. You know, on a sunny day, there's always folks about. There's a lot to love in Arbroath, for sure.
I mean, I would say the harbour, Gayfield, obviously, 36-0, you know, George Best playing for the Vics, all that stuff. But, the harbour, the cliffs, I mean, that's a world-class walk, that, from there to Auchmithie. And, of course, St Vigins, but I think we'll probably talk about St Vigins again later. Michelle, new crafts. I was thinking today, because I'm spending far too much of my time learning how to etch brass. And I really should know better by this point in my life that these little meanders off into other crafts come at a cost for work that I'm supposed to be getting on with. But I'm etching brass and I'm loving it. Absolutely love it. I've got my wee wet metal work area set up here. I've got pots of acid that are marked danger, and all that stuff, you know. I'm thoroughly loving it. But tell us about your craft life, because you've been doing some lino printing, haven't you?
I'm a serial. I like to pick up crafts. I like learning new skills. Honestly, I think I am a jack of all trades, master of none. Right? It's like I don't mind, admitting that. Like I enjoy learning something new. I've always enjoyed craft. I mean, I've always enjoyed, craft and design since I was a wee nipper. But since I was a wee girl, I always really enjoyed, crafting, and I used to make my own, Barbie doll clothes, and do you know what I mean? I've just always had a right thing for it. So I just enjoy the learning of something new, and taking that time. So I've done a lot of different things. I've learned a lot, which has stood me in really good stead actually for the job in now, because I can do a bit of flint knapping or a bit of, willow weaving, or, I don't have to sit and make
a bit of stone carving.
Or a bit of stone carving, exactly.
You've done a bit of stone carving.
Yeah. So I think it's trying to look across not just traditional crafts, but just, crafts in general, and just moving across those as a personal interest of mine, and then being able to share it now, just little tasters. And then if they really take it, then they can go on and explore. And I really like that. And so I'm really glad that that was my nature, that was my personality. I need the whole works, I have to have the whole kit. And I'm even looking at getting the best tools. I can't even,
of course.
Can't even look at. Yeah. You were asked the question about the lino printing. That's my recent one. It was, I did a wee workshop with Pam Robertson at the Handpicked Gallery, in Letham.
Nice, in Letham, yeah.
Yeah. So they were running a workshop, and I was feeling a real lack of. I've just said there that I do a lot of stuff with children. I share a lot of skills, but often you don't actually feed your own. That my passion is to craft, and often I don't take time to make for myself. And I really noticed an absence of that. So I was delighted when I saw a workshop coming up for lino printing, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to go along. I fancy a day to myself learning something new. And as soon as I put the lino cutter to the lino, and I felt that cut, I was like, oh, that feels good. Like it was a very pleasing feeling, and I just loved it.
That sounds to me like the first time I cut into deer leather. There was a new world opened up.
New world, that's it.
Had it been removed from the deer? Good.
The deer was thankful for that.
Yeah. So that's what it was like. It was very like that. It was just an instant like, oh, I like this. This is good. And it's an interesting one, lino printing, because it's quite hard. It's quite tricky. You have to know.
Yeah, I tried it. Yeah.
you really have to think, and bless Pam for she honestly the most patient teacher ever, because trying to explain it as well, it was quite it was quite tricky, and you needed to make a mess of it first to understand what she meant,
Yeah.
So it was like I remember carving away and thinking I know what I'm doing, and I'm carving away, and then when I inked up and put it on the paper, I was like, well, that didn't work at all. But I needed that process. I needed to get it wrong in order to start doing it right. So it's I like the thinking. I like you have to sit and work it out. It's like, what are you trying to do here? And it's very, very satisfying in terms of like focusing your attention and being in that present moment. And and I really like that. And the other good thing in it for me is that I'm a very focused on outcome a lot of the time. So it's like I want to have a beautiful thing, at the end of it. Whereas lino printing, it kind of has this way of you're not really focused on the end result. It's the process that I'm enjoying. So, because to be fair, you could put ink on it and it just doesn't turn out the way you thought it was going to turn out, but that doesn't really matter because it's the process that I've been enjoying, and that's never happened to me before in a craft. When it's about the process and not the outcome.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've done a bit of it, and I like you. I went and got all the gear. All the gear, no idea. That's what they say, isn't it?
I should have come to you first.
No, I couldn't find it. But I wasn't really enjoying it as a process until I thought, hold on a minute, this is just carving. Why am I struggling with this wee screwdriver-like thing, the gouge thing, And I went and got a block of stone, and instead I carved out the printing block with the block of stone with a chisel and printed from that. And you can see it behind me. See it on the shelf behind me. See the Berlin, the framed Berlin print up and off. So I just printed it from a block of stone. I mean, it's exactly the same. Yeah, it's just the material I'm more comfortable using. And it's I actually trained as a printer. That was my first job.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad was a master printer. So he trained myself and my brother up to print with a letterpress. So yeah, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. You see, my problem is I'm a reader, right? So if you put me, as my father used to, put me at the end of the letterpress watching all the sheets come out, one after the other, and what I'm meant to be spotting are two things. One is water coming through, which means there's too much water going onto the printing plate. And the other one is, I can't remember, running through or something, coming through. And that's where you're running out of water and there's ink appearing on the page where it's not meant to be. But of course, say it was like a church newsletter that was coming out. I'm reading the church newsletter, right? One word at a time with every sheet that comes out. And my dad would look round the corner and the sheet would be half covered in ink and he's shutting everything down. Why didn't you tell me? Oh, sorry, I was halfway through reading about somebody dying. I was the world's worst printer. But interestingly, I spent a lot of time cutting letters, and my father set type, and in fact he couldn't tell the difference really between letters that are the right way round and the wrong way round, because he set everything backwards when he was learning to do all that stuff. And then my grandfather was a sign writer. So he was a painter and decorator, but he used to paint signs on the sides of vans, which unfortunately means that none of them exist anymore because vans are all got a finite life, And then my great-grandfather used to make farm signs. He was a blacksmith and a farrier, so he used to make farm signs out of iron. So there's like 4 generations of letter making, which is it's pretty cool. It's pretty unusual, I should think.
Cool.
Yeah. So that leads us nicely on to the question, and I'm going to ask you, Paul, the same question, and that is, if you had an all-expenses course to learn a new craft and a week off, somebody looking after the bairns, what would it be, Michelle?
What would it be? Right, so, that's a good question. What would I do? Well, it's a funny thing, right? I've always quite fancied watchmaking.
Watches, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that is that horology?
I know there's
is
a word.
Horologist?
There is yeah, right. I'll have to believe you on that one because I know there's so much, but I'm not sure.
I think it is.
I was laughing because it's either in my mind there. I went straight to like watches or shoes, and then I was thinking, I think it just goes back. It just goes back to a real want. I always really wanted to work in Timpson's, you know, the cobblers. I always wanted. I tell you, it's the truth. It's
I mean,
God's truth.
of all the dreams, that sounds like one that could quite easily have been realised if you'd just put in an application.
Honestly. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, that's the truth, because I used to walk past the window, right, and there would be sat at the window, you know, tinkering away, and I was making bed, but 3 watches. And I used to think, that's a job for me. Like, I would like that job, sitting at that window, just watching the world go by, tinkering away, you know. And I thought, so actually, is it a job? Is it a job in Timpson's I'm after, or is it no? But it is watches. Watches. I think if you were talking all expenses, you know, really getting into a craft, that would be quite an exquisite one. I would enjoy that.
You could go to Switzerland for a week, and to Rolex, and learn horology and how to fix. I think the Timpsons guys are actually pretty cool, aren't they? You know, fixing watches and shoes and stuff.
Well, I think
it's actually cool. Yeah,
it's a very cool job.
Yeah, I went in the other day and I said I need a wee bit for my watch strap for the links, you know, on this thing here. And the guy's like, yeah, no bother. I said, look, yeah, go and get shopping. Come back 10 minutes. Came back and he fixed it. Magic.
See then? There you go. Honestly, that's a genuine unknown truth, but that's a God's honest. I would be walking past and thinking, yep, I like that. They've got all their tools around them. Do you know, that wee space at the window? And yeah, I think that would be quite an exquisite craft, I guess. And the little intricacies of the clock and the working. And could you imagine how amazing that would be to actually have? It's that kind of critical thinking stage. How's this working? How are we doing this? And then, you know, creating this like working, beautiful thing that tells time. I mean, it would be quite a skill. So yeah, there you are. So
that's actually really cool. It is. It's really cool. I was in there. We're going to talk about little museums later, but I was in the little museum in Dornoch, right up in Sutherland at the weekend there, and in that little museum they've got a watchmaker's a desktop, like his bench, preserved. Yeah, as when he finished working there in the 1950s, and like you say, it's got all these tiny little tools and these little engraving tools and things. But the other good thing is, throughout the museum, there's things like trophies and things all through the museum, all with this guy's engraving work on them. Not only can you see all of his engraving work as you go around the museum, because I was looking through it and I was thinking, all this engraving, because I love engraving, particularly old style engraving, and I'm thinking, all this engraving work, I bet this was by one local guy. And then you come round the corner and there's his workbench, right, with all these engraving tools and these little things like dentist tools that he's been, and even a couple of watches he was working on, and the little baths for soaking them in oils, and everything's intricate, every single thing. There's nothing on the bench that's like a hammer, you know, everything's like micro level stuff. And you could just tell this was a careful man. And he'd been and worked as a watchmaker in Canada and things like that, you know. He's a really interesting dude. But you could see all his work. Oh, just absolutely brilliant.
You know, as you're speaking, I'm rubbing my hands. I was like getting excited, thinking, oh, I love this. More tools. I love the sound of that. I love the sound of that.
I would go into that museum just to see that, you know.
Yeah.
Hand engraving is such an impressive talent.
Absolutely.
You know, such an impressive skill.
Yeah.
And I think it used to be much more common. You know, look at the amount of silver work and such that's hand engraved in the 19th century, for example. You know, you find so much that's just that now is just, you know, mass produced and laser engraved and so on, because it's just the way things have gone.
I think it was quite a long apprenticeship.
Aye. Well, I had an apprentice for a while, Italian lad, Dario, and he went on to train in the Italian Mint in hand engraving, and he came back to Edinburgh, and I think he became the head engraver for Hamilton and Inches in Edinburgh.
Really?
His work's exceptional, you know, fine artistry, and I always really envied that level of craft. in engraving metals in particular.
Yeah,
There's just something special about it.
I know a chap in Dublin, Aidan Breen. He's a really, really nice guy, but he was a chaser in the Dublin silver industry. And, there's not many guys from that industry left still cutting about, And Aidan's just one of these... He's like the ultimate craftsman, He's really well educated. He can give you a couple of pages from Ulysses off the top of his head, and just knew everyone. My great hero from Ireland, from the turn of the last century, a guy called Seamus Murphy, who wrote a book called Stone Mad, and he was a sculptor. But he wrote this book about the stone industry and about how there was an itinerant population who chose to go on the road because they'd go from one place to another and they'd keep work that they were particularly good at doing. And it's just amazing. They were called the Brothers of the Dust. And they'd wander into a stone carving workshop. And again, like the engravers, there'd be one in every town, right? So you'd wander in and they knew these guys. They were kind of famous. And they think, oh, that guy's really good at Virgin Marys. So they would keep some Virgin Mary carving for him to do when he came by, because he always came by in July or something, And it was just, and if they didn't have any work for them, they took what they called a national. Everybody had to chuck in a shilling. And that would get them, they put them up for the night, and that would get them a couple of pints and something to eat, and then they'd move on to the next town. And it was an entire professional class of people. And I'm sure it wasn't just related to stone carving. But I mentioned this guy to Aidan because a couple of the guys in the silver industry that he'd mentioned, it sounded like this guy, and he said, "Oh, I knew him. I knew Seamus Murphy." I'm just like, yes, But he was a chaser, doing like Rapusi work. His standard of work, still making great stuff, absolutely top drawer stuff, and just a really, really interesting dude. So, what about yourself, Paul? Would it be engraving then that you would escape to?
You see, there's several skills, several crafts that I would love to just intensely throw myself at,
Yeah.
fully down the rabbit holes. Hand engraving would certainly be one, but hand forging.
Right.
Hand forging and pattern welding, which a lot of folk, come down to the armoury and they fully expect you. The first thing they've envisaged is you bare-chested over some fire, hammering away. Everyone expects you to forge, to make your blades. It's just the image most folk have in their heads. And they're a little disappointed, I think, when they come in and find you using an industrial angle grinder fully dressed,
Yeah.
A wee bit manky all the same, but that's as close as it gets to the hand-forged image. So I think I could very happily, and obviously you'd want to learn from the best, someone like Owen Bush or Howard Clark, these lads that are just, they channel the little people, I think, and what they do anyway. Their work's so fine, and even though you're working with a forge and you're making a knife or even a sword blade, which are big things, it's the level of finesse, the level that work is fine at the same time is what makes it special. And so to be that capable, I think, with a forge, as much as I'm capable with a 9-inch angle grinder, would be just fine.
And you're certainly very capable with an angle grinder. I think Chris Grant describes you as a dancer with the angle grinder. I think that's what he said. I think
it's a funny thing because it's a big beast of a tool.
A Highland dancer, I think he said.
It's a big beast of a tool, but I like to use it like a paintbrush, basically. I'll use that thing like a paintbrush, quite happy.
Well, for me, it would be stained glass. If I wasn't a stone carver, I think I would have found my way to stained glass somehow. I've got real respect for people who work with stained glass, and I just love the effect of it all, and the medievalism of it, that idea of people walking into a great church.
Into the medieval period, didn't you?
Yeah, always. I was born in the wrong period, but I'm quite happy to be
medieval
living in this period. And it's this idea of someone walking into a building and encountering something that they've just never been prepared for. That sensory. I mean, imagine walking into a medieval cathedral on pilgrimage when you've only ever known your house in a clearing in the woods, and you're walking this place drenched in light and air and space and music and things. It would be completely overpowering. So
I mind you, David, in the wee church at Innerwick,
Oh,
standing in awe of the stained glass.
yeah.
Is it St Andrew? I think
It is, and the great thing about it is that it's not just St Andrew; it's St Andrew in Glen Lyon.
Yes.
So he's carrying the fish,
Aye. And it is stunning.
Oh,
it's
very
it is
arts and
stunning.
crafts.
Yeah,
it's very arts and crafts.
I do mind you standing in full awe and respect of that.
It is one of my favourite bits of stained glass. I bore my family crazy when we're in France and things on holiday. I go off looking for some. Did I tell you about the time I went off to look in the? I think it was in Bourges in France. They've got a UNESCO World Heritage Site cathedral. And I said to Gillian and Jamie, who was quite wee at the time, I said, "You guys go and get a cup of coffee or something. I'm going to go and see this Gothic masterpiece, your flying buttresses and all the rest of it." So I wandered up and I walked past a whole bunch of people standing about outside. I thought, oh, they must be waiting to get in or something. I just wander in, through the door, there's no ticket office or anything, you just wander in. I'm wandering about, having a look up and down, and I hear the door slam shut, boom, right? And I look round, and there's a priest looking at me, and he's saying, Monsieur, come. So, me? So I wander up, and he's pointing at a chair, and I have to sit down. And I sit down, and I'm in the front row, and I'm at a funeral. So I'm sitting at this funeral mass, right? And I'm in the front row. I can't even get my phone out. Now, the reason that I didn't clock, right, that this was a funeral was because it's France, it's rural France. Nobody gets dressed up. There's nobody wearing a suit, right, like here. Everybody's just come from their work. We'll go and see Pierre off, and then we'll get back in time for a piece and a cup of tea. So I'm sitting there, right, in the front row. I'm feeling for my phone. I think I can't even get my phone out, right? So I'm mumbling along to the words and all the rest of it, right? And I can't let Gillian know. She's frantic by this point, right? I can feel the phone going in my pocket. I can't do anything. I'm completely helpless. I'm thinking, as soon as this boy blows for full time, I need to be out that door, right? But of course, you get to the end of the mass, and I'm just watching what's going on, and the family go and line up at the door. So boyo here has got to go. Sorry for your loss. Sorry for your loss. Kiss the widow on both cheeks. Classy, eh? Sorry for your loss. I mean, I must have gone in the corner, and they're going, it's a Scottish guy. Pierre never left the village. What's going on? Who is this dude? And then I'm thinking, I hope he didn't go to a football match at Hampden, when approximately my age ago, get scandalised the whole village. So I got back and Julie's like, where the hell have you been? And I'm like, I was at a funeral.
Well.
Searching for stained glass in Bourges Cathedral and end up at the boys' send-off.
Crashing a funeral.
It's completely mad. It was completely mad. Now, Michelle, sorry, I don't know how you follow that, but you used to be adventures in Angus, right? And you're certainly no stranger to a little adventuring. What was your best ever adventure in Angus or elsewhere?
Adventure's a funny one because I want to be able to say, it was like, climbing Ben Nevis or, do you know what I mean, something extreme. But I'll tell you the God's honest truth that I think about, adventures, and I think about what have I done, and I've travelled all over, and I've visited, Rome, and I remember going to see David Gilmour live at Pompeii at the DCA like a few years ago, and it's probably the most spontaneous because 2 weeks later I was on a flight to I was heading to Pompeii. I was going to visit. I saw it on the screen in the DCA and it was like, I need to go there. And 2 weeks later I walked into the like ancient amphitheatre at Pompeii to the sounds of Pink Floyd playing, and it was like, honestly, it was I think that's the most surreal kind of experience because you were within no time walking into this amphitheatre, listening to echoes, Pink Floyd echoes, like playing. And it was like, that was very, that was a big adventure because it was so spontaneous. I love Ireland. I spend a lot of time crossing Ireland, different places. But on my 40th birthday, we jumped across to Belfast. We'd booked a car. We jumped in the car. We drove up to up to the Giant's Causeway. Had a bit of a road trip, just like lots of exciting things like that. So it's not an absence of not doing these things, but the truth is, my best adventures they're just the moments that I've had with my two kids, the three of us together. Like, the best adventures, the most memorable ones, the ones that really stick with me are, believe it or not, it's crossing Fife. It's,
okay.
I've spent a lot of time moving about Fife, and I've spent a lot of time when I'm not exploring Angus. I love Fife, and I think there's a lot to explore still. And I've had a lot of my favourite moments, with them too. And it's just been the three of us for a lot of years. So it was the kind of experience of being on my own, with the two of them and the three of us moving. Your adventure to me is like, it's that sense of freedom, or, it's a sense of freedom, and it's a sense of, you're exposing to new experiences. It doesn't have to be big and wild and wacky. It can be something very simple, like the first time you've had a solo holiday with your children and the experiences that unfolded with that. And whenever I've done anything with them two, my daughter and my son, whenever I've done anything with them two, it's always been my favourite, best adventure. And that's speaking from the heart. Okay, they're teenagers now, so, we're starting to, the adventures are starting to get less and less, but, Ethan's listening to Elvis. There's Rob Zombie. There's the whole mix.
Yeah, there's one my grandson's listening at the moment. Sigma Boy, like Sigma
oh, right,
Boy.
Yeah.
Sigma Boy. Oh my god!
I don't know what that's about. That Sigma. What? A lot of the kids say that. I don't know what it means, but a lot of the kids say that at school. They're like, "Oh, that's Sigma. That's Sigma." And I'm like, but yeah, it's like it's listening to their music and just letting them kind of we're sharing that journey together, and a lot of it is just them two listening to music. I like a Starbucks.
What I like about some of your posts on Facebook is that so many of them start with, "This was completely unplanned."
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the best. Yeah, and Paul, when I was thinking about the last time we had a great adventure, it had to be when we were almost lost at sea.
This is a good story then.
Oh, that one. Aye.
We were very, very almost lost at sea. In fact, for a while we were lost at sea.
It was a wee bit concerning for a while.
At the end of this particular adventure, I know it's strange to start the story at the end, but at the end of this adventure, Paul and I were sitting with a fish supper that we could hardly eat. We were so exhausted, and a pint we could hardly drink, staring into space and just looking at each other. And Paul said to me, "Do you know what? That was harder, than selection for the paras." So, I was so exhausted, my teeth hurt. It was that bad.
Aye.
But where were we again? What was the name of the island we were searching for gold?
Forest Island. In the Summer Isles. That story started with a hunt, a real live treasure hunt, searching for gold from the Spanish Armada. But that's kind of by the by. We nearly died. Or we at least thought we might.
You see, I don't actually think we were in that much danger, but we were certainly in danger of being rescued by the lifeboat. And
being rescued was the
and we were determined that we were not going to have that embarrassment of having been taken in by the lifeboat. And we could see where we were drifting to, and it was a long way away from where we were. It wouldn't have been a pleasant thing to have drifted that far. But we made the decision. So we're trying to find gold, and there was good evidence of gold, some gold having been there, wasn't there?
Yes, aye. There was 19th century follow-on provenance, as well as the local traditions that it was buried on this island, and we thought we'd have a go. and metal detect for it. And we tried the smaller of the two islands, and I think gave a decent effort. We're trying to find landmarks, hills and divots, and any caves, any signs, things that you'd look for. Where are you going to bury things? And of course, nothing. Not a thing. I think I dug twice.
Yeah.
And it was, a tin can and a bit of foil or something,
Yeah.
Aye. And nothing on that island at all.
And we were doing
coming
so
off
well.
though. Aye. Because the boat had an outboard, and so we went to get it going coming back, and could we get this thing going? Just couldn't.
Well, we got it going long enough.
Away from the island.
Yeah, we had it going long enough to get out to sea. So we went out the back of the island. Not the bit that was facing the land, because it was so windy and it was a narrow channel. So we went out the back of we thought we'll take a great big wide arc round the back. So we just got to the apex of the big arc, and the outboard just died. And it was one of these rib boats. It turned out to be
quite a simple. It was a connection. It was just the fuel.
Yeah.
Connection wasn't fully rammed in enough that it just wasn't getting the fuel from the tank into the engine. Which neither of us realised, despite all best efforts to diagnose the problem. As we were slowly drifting even further away.
Now, we had a pair of oars.
It was a long way to land.
Yeah, we had a pair of oars, and unfortunately, it was a big boat, right? And there was no rowlocks or anything, so we got these two oars. So we decided, right, let's divide up the task. Paul, you try and get the engine going again, and I'll row and try and keep us at least here, right? So, the hardest workout of my life, right? Trying to keep the boat just from drifting too far. And we'd get the boat going again for like 30 seconds, and it would take us almost back to where we drifted from. And we realised the game's a bogey. We are not getting back to the beach that we took off from. It's just physically impossible. So we start scanning the shore, right? Because it's like when you're up the hills, right? I was always taught if you're falling up the hills, jump, right? Because at least it gives you some control over where you're going to land. Right? You might still break your leg, but you at least had some control over it. So we're looking and going, I think I can guide us into shore with the oars, right? So if we choose somewhere to land, and I'm looking at the crofts coming down the hillside, and only one of them had a gate leading onto the beach. So we think, that's the one, we've got to get to there. And which we did, right? And we landed there. Unfortunately, we were about a quarter of a mile away from the gate on the roughest, rockiest shoreline you've ever seen in your life. So we get out and we walk up the croft, and the boy at the top, he was absolutely brilliant. There's a family like having a little barbecue at the croft house. And the guy said, "Oh, you're okay." He says, "We've been watching you through the binoculars, and we were on standby. We were going to phone the lifeboat, but you looked like you had a plan." Right? So we're watching you, and we're thinking, if at any point you look like the plan's just gone, right? It's just no happening, we're going to get on the phone to Ullapool and the boat will be up, So I was like, thanks, mate, I really, really appreciate that. But then, right, we had to get the boat with the outboard over this obstacle course of rocks on this beach. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Just two of us with this massive boat, and trying to lift it and cajole it. I mean, even carrying the outboard was hard enough. And then go and walk and get the truck and the trailer and come and reverse it down the croft. And it was just epic, absolutely epic. And terrible. It was exhausting. It was so hard.
And entirely unplanned.
Entirely. But it was also epic as well. And
it was an adventure.
It was an adventure.
Now you talk about it. Now it was a good story.
Yeah, but it also teaches you something about your pals, doesn't it? Because I have to say, Paul, I'd rather have been in that situation with you than almost anybody else, because it was, you kind of we sort of trusted each other, didn't we? To sort of, you do your bit and I'll do my bit, and we just didn't accept that it couldn't be done and got on with it. It was pretty epic in its own way, but flipping heck, never again.
It was.
Right, now, I've got a Michelle question. Yeah, Michelle.
Oh, gosh.
Michelle songs, Beatles or Guns N' Roses?
But do you know what? I'm going to say Beatles, because I'm actually singing that now in my head. I love that. I love that song.
There's loads of Michelle songs.
I'm not going to put you through the misery of singing it to you now, but I am singing it in my head. I love that. I love the Beatles. I can hear Guns N' Roses. I mean, it's cool to hear a song with your name in it, right? I mean, that's cool. Anyway, the Beatles, because that I remember that as a kid. That's what people used to sing. It was always Michelle, my belle. You got that. You got that everywhere when you were a child. Whereas, Guns N' Roses, not so much. So yeah.
Listen, you mentioned something earlier about kind of mindfulness and just being in the moment and stuff. I was sitting with Ollie yesterday. Ollie's my grandson, and I was sitting in a tree with him at Miniki Park. And we were both sitting on this branch in this tree, right? So he'll say to me, "What have you been up to?" And I go, "Well, I go to the park a lot, because I'm looking after Ollie." And we spend loads of time sitting in trees, and we're just sitting in the tree, shooting the breeze, watching the world go by. And I was thinking, you have no idea, mate, how good this is. I do, because I'm 53, I'm running out of time, I'm sitting there thinking this is just the best thing ever. Who else do I know who's sitting in a tree with a 5-year-old chatting right now? Not many. And I was just thinking, you have no idea, mate. One day you'll look back, hopefully, and you'll think, those were just the best times. Sitting in a tree with your granddad. What could be better, The kids don't appreciate things. The youth of today, they don't appreciate.
I did a lot of stuff when they were wee, and I was always out in the woods with them. And fire down at the beach, having marshmallows, and it was quite nice because I would often just be. I would say I was quite a spontaneous mum. So I would like to say I was quite a cool mum. But back,
that's not for you to judge. That's for them.
We're not here. So, but yeah, I think I would be sat maybe at 8 o'clock or whatever at night, and I would just be like, "Well, we'll go out and we'll go and have a wee fight," So it was always quite exciting, And I remember my son sitting. It's a few years ago now, and he was sitting with his pal Harry. Now Harry probably doesn't get out as much as Ethan, so he's not going out in the same way. And I remember he was great. I loved having him around because he'd always be up for it. My kids would be like, "Oh God, we're going out again." Whereas Harry would always be really up for it. So I remember sitting at the beach and having this wee fire, and we were sitting, having marshmallows, s'mores or whatever, and telling spooky stories. And Harry had said to Ethan, "You're really lucky having a mum like this." And he was like, "Aye, it loses its shine a little bit when we're doing it."
Too cool, don't they? Too cool for school. They don't want to hang out in a tree with mum.
I'm sure they'll return to the wild.
No, there's no way. I remember saying that to Ethan recently, actually. I said, "What happened, Ethan? You used to really enjoy this. You used to come with me, and you used to, you loved the water, eh? So we would go to Perner's Brig quite a lot. And we'd have a wee fire, and I'd put up a wee hammock, so Evie could she'd read her book, listen to her music or whatever, and Ethan would be in the water, and it was great. Life was great." I says, "What happened?" And he went, "Free will." That was his answer to me.
Right, what are we drinking tonight, guys? Did you manage to grab a little cheeky beer?
Oh,
what?
I didn't get the memo about the beer. I've got a cup of tea.
Did I not tell you we always have a beer?
You never.
That's very remiss of me.
I've been watching your podcast as well. I should have known better. Do you know?
What are you having, Paul?
For the two of us, Michelle, don't worry. I'll drink for the two of us. So this is a brewery. I've not tried their beer before. They're in Linlithgow, Strangers Brewing Co. And it's Cockleroy Amber Ale. So
is that not
Cockleroy apparently is the hill. Cockleroy. I don't know. You've clearly spent more time in France than either of us.
Yeah.
You've been at one French
crashing funerals and the likes, This is named after a big hill that overlooks Linlithgow, apparently. So.
And is it French? Is it a French name?
I have no idea. It is spelled ROI.
Yeah. Very interesting.
I'm not sure on that. Not sure on that.
Well, I'm drinking because I completely failed to go and get a beer. This was all my idea, and I've singularly failed to get a beer any of the 4 episodes that we've done. So I'm stuck with the Scottish beer that my wife went and got, Newcastle Brown Ale, that famous Scottish town. And you know what? I'm quite enjoying it. I'm sure it was Scottish at some point. It's just not Scottish anymore. And it's great, isn't it? I mean, a proper traditional beer. I mean, I've forgotten how good it is.
Yeah, are you actually getting to enjoy it now? Are you actually starting to...
I'm enjoying that more than that Brewdog grapefruit trash that I was drinking the last time.
Was that not to your liking?
Oh, no, grapefruit juice doesn't belong in a beer. That was a bad idea. How that got past planning stage, I have no idea. But no, that did not work. So I'm quite happy drinking
this is quite
the Nuki Brown.
Aye. This is quite nice. Quite a warm, sort of biscuity, malty amber ale. Quite happy.
I was enjoying a beer the other night in the Dornoch Castle Whisky Bar. Have you ever been in there? Oh, what a place! So it's like 15th century castle. The bar's in the cellar. Yeah, incredible array of whiskies. Nice and moody, and just a really cool place to... Dornoch's great. I'd never been to Dornoch. I don't think, unless maybe when I was a kid. And it was just really cool. I was just wandering about. And the pipe band were playing, and it's just a groovy place to be, just a very cool place. And the stained glass in the cathedral. Dornoch Cathedral's like a wee, very petite little cathedral, and the stained glass in it is out of this world. Just really, really cool. All the right colours. I like the blues and the purples and things. Not that I spend a lot of time thinking about stained glass.
Sure you're not on commission from the Dornoch Tourist Board at the moment? Because you're selling it rather well.
Here's a message from our sponsors. It's actually just a cool wee town. I don't know why I've never been. It's not really like the rest of Sutherland, It's very sort of douce and polite, and there's a lot of golfers around. It's a bit St Andrewsy in some ways, but it's very cool. And they've got a great little museum. There's not even that much in it. They've got a great little diorama of a battle that I'll show you. It's really, really cool. But it's just one of these little village, little town museums. It tells the story really well. They've got the cool things like the jeweller's bench and things like that. They don't really have like a lot of big swords and Pictish stones and all that kind of stuff. They don't have it. But it just tells the story really, really nicely. And I like these wee places. There's a good one at we were at the one at Tain as well. There's an excellent little museum at Tain, and we met a guy called Jason there who was completely enthusiastic and telling us all these great stories. I always feel sorry, right, when you're at the Pictish Art Society and you go on a trip to somewhere like the museum at Tain, because the guy's coming out with this information and he'll say something like, and it's recently been said that this might be that, and Professor Jane Geddes will go, yeah, that was me that said that. Yeah. Everything the guy says, and supposedly, and somebody will go, yeah, I wrote that. Yeah. And that's actually true. Yeah.
Aye.
And the guy's like immediately looks terrified because his whole spiel he's been perfecting over 10 years. He's now thinking, what have I got in here that's a bit shaky? Because it's going to come apart very, very quickly with this lot, They'll say things like, oh, and this is believed to be a practice piece, and I'm like, no. No, that carving's not a practice piece, mate. Just move on. It's probably best just to move on. But it's great fun. But I love all these wee places with all the little saints and stuff. This St Coleman at Portmahomet. Well, we think it's St Coleman. And then round here you got obviously St Vigins, St Buddo up at Kirkbuddo. He's a pretty cool. I don't think it took much to become a saint, right? Back in the early medieval. There's a lot of very weird saints, like St Vigin, St Fechin. If it is St Fechin of Four, right, this Irish missionary guy, then that's a very, very weird choice of dedication. Because St Vigin, if you read the hagiography, if you read the life of St Fechin of Four, he wasn't a very nice guy. I mean, there's a lot of very, very weird legends associated with him. I don't know how you could read that hagiography and think, we're building a new church in Scotland. That's the boy for us. We'll dedicate it to him. Because there's a story where he was sitting writing out scriptures, in his scriptorium, and there was children playing hurling out on the green in the village, and they were disturbing him, right? So he went out and shouted at them, and then made them all drop down dead.
Oh.
Yeah, all the kids in the village, whole village worth of kids, all playing hurling.
Yeah.
So what's that? 11, 12, 14 aside? And they're all dead. They're all lying there, and he thinks, right, I'll get some peace and quiet now. Back to the script writing, right? So he goes back, and there's a knock on the door, and it's the local villagers going, what happened? It's a bit of an overreaction, wasn't it? All the kids are dead. And he goes, oh, no, I suppose. No, there you are then. And he brings them all back to life. And this is all in the hagiography. And that's not even the weirdest story in the hagiography. It's very, very weird. And you think, why would you choose this guy? You know, he killed the children. He's been guilty of infanticide. So I'll never get my head around that, you know, the choice of him. St Buddha and that would make more sense, because St Buddha was actually here. St Fechin was never in Angus. He was never in Scotland. He was never in St Vincent's or Arbroath or anything at all, you know. I was commissioned to do a stone at St Vincent's. My first idea was completely mental. I was going to have St Fechin, surfing his way from Ireland to Scotland, on the back of a Pictish beastie. And I made this little maquette. I don't know what was got into my head, right? And I made this little maquette, and as soon as I looked at it, I went, oh my God, how do I destroy that? No one can see this. This is the most stupid idea I've ever had. I had to use an angle grinder to take it all off, because if you throw it in the sea, somebody will find it eventually. And they'll go, what the hell? Was McGovern on when he was doing that? That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, traditional music. What have you been listening to, guys? Give me some recommendations. What have you been listening to? Because the workshop, I'm always trying to find you. My teenager, Michelle, is at University in Edinburgh studying music. He is brilliant for sending me not only music he's made himself, but music that I should be listening to. Because he's got it in his head that I'm like in my 70s or something, and you know, popular music has passed me by, so he needs to point me in the right direction. And I'm not complaining, because it's brilliant. He sends me Spotify stuff all the time. It's great. But I've been listening to a lot of Manran this week. Yeah, just that. Album after album.
Really good.
Yeah, absolutely superb. And what else was I listening to?
Right.
Manran, and I went back and listened to Wolfstone again. I hadn't listened to Wolfstone for years.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you know that album, the live album, not enough shouting, with Balavanik and the Prophet and all the £10 float and all that. Oh, just brilliant.
Aye, they were pioneers,
Yeah.
weren't they?
Absolutely.
I've been listening to some, catching up on some episodes of Gary West's podcast, Enjoy Your Piping.
All right.
You know, and it's great. He has a great mix of different piping styles, pipe bands, and, you know, solo artists, but international piping as well. And it's great. It's great. It's very inspirational. You know, it's certainly inspired my own wee piping journey along the way. So I've been, getting a lot of piping coming out the armoury lately, mostly from Gary West's Enjoy Your Piping.
When I was up in Dornoch, I had the earbuds in the cathedral, and I was listening to the monks from Notre Dame Cathedral in France singing the... Remember when we went to Pluscarden, Michelle, and after the burning of the Clavey, and just that whole experience of just this beautiful, timeless thing, and it all came back to me in Dornoch.
Yeah, I know that was, honestly, that was something else. I can't even put words on that. The sound, and actually it's funny, I would not that I have got, you know, I have these kind of have this music in my playlist. I have, like, it was funny, we were over in Fife at Crawford Priory.
Yes, beautiful. Never been, but I've seen it. I think the next time we go to Elgin, because if you remember when we were up in Elgin and we were in that chapter house, I think, you know, that fabulous building with the vaulted ceiling, I think we should have taken a little speaker in there and just played some of that sacred music in there, and it would be absolutely superb. Yeah. Next time.
Next time.
Yeah.
Next year,
absolutely.
that's to happen.
next year we'll do that, and we'll go back to Pluscarden as well for the service on the Sunday morning, because it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life, for sure. Well, listen, guys, that's been fantastic. We are out of time, but thanks very much to Paul and Michelle, and thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another special guest. Thank you.